So you just got a new bike and you're super stoked. It might even be used, that's just new to you, and you want to get the thing set up properly to set you up for success. I've got 40 tips right here to show you how to get this thing set up. Let's get into it. The reason why I wanted to do this video is because I've gotten so much email about it recently. I did one video where I said, hey, I have a new bike checklist that I go through, and now I'm getting like, I don't know, 5, 10 emails a day asking me for the list of what it is that I do. So here's the list. So I've had a lot of new bikes over the years, and if there's one thing I've learned, it's that setup is incredibly important. Doesn't matter whether it's a KTM, a Beta, a Yamaha, a Honda, whatever. All of these bikes don't always come perfect from the factory or from the prior owner. So it helps to go through and check some of these things no matter what color your bike is. The list that I'm gonna go through today is not necessarily something that you have to do on every bike, but it's something that you should be cognizant of. And it's kind of an ever-evolving list for me. So don't feel like you have to do all of these things or buy all of these things. But just take a look at these things, because these are legitimately things that I'm doing on each one of my bikes, or at least making a decision on each one of my bikes. And it might be helpful to you. Let's check it out. I should note that this list is in no particular order. It's not in order of importance. It's just things that I do. One of the things is to check the clickers and make sure that I'm familiar with them and kind of put them in the standard position. Don't just trust that the factory has the clickers in the right position, and don't trust that you know which is rebound and compression, because all the bikes here in the shop are slightly different, so check your clickers. Take 10 minutes to just go around the entire bike and make sure everything's tight. It's only gonna take you a few wrenches, and you can go around and check for all the loose bolts, because you probably will find one. Take a peek around for leaking gaskets. You'd be amazed how you can find some gaskets that are not totally sealed on a brand new bike. Go ahead and check the torque spec on your triple clamp bolts. Usually your top triple clamps are gonna be about 17 Newton meters, and the bottom one is gonna be about 12, but this is one place where I definitely think you need a torque wrench to make sure those things are in spec. Hey, before we get too deep into this, if you're watching this video before June 15th, you have a chance to win the 3 bikes that I'm showing up on the screen right now. I've got a 2020 Beta 300RR Race Edition, a 2020 Yamaha YZ250FX, and a 2019 KTM 300 XCW. All of those bikes are going to be given away in this sweepstakes. Go to my website, dirtbikechannel.com, right now to get entered before June 15th. I want to check to make sure I don't have fork bind. There's a couple different ways I want to do this. I'll take my front tire off and I'll put my axle back in and see if the axle can move freely. That tells me if the forks are in the same height up and down in the triple clamps. And then also I put my tire back on, and then I make sure that I have these pinch bolts installed so that this side of the fork is not bound up. It's very important that this travels in alignment, so I'm checking my fork bind 2 different ways. We need to set our riding sag. I got videos on how to do that, but essentially we can set that anywhere between like 100 millimeters of sag up to maybe like 112 millimeters of sag, depending on what you need to do. You might need a new spring to accomplish this in an efficient manner. It's a great time to switch out to a heavy duty tube if you're a tube user. That way you don't get out there on your brand new bike and get a flat right off the bat. Also, if you're gonna run moose bibs, I don't know why you wouldn't do that right now, and maybe get the bike set up exactly how you want it, how you like it, how you're comfortable, straight out of the gate. I don't know why you wouldn't. I install tubeless on my bikes right away. I don't even ride the bikes before I've installed tubeless, so that's how I feel about it. You might want to do moose bibs or heavy duty tubes or something, but I love the tubeless so much. It's one of the things I do right when I get a brand new bike. When I get a brand new bike, I like to change to a tire that I know and trust right away. There's a few tires out there that I know and that I love. I know how it performs. I want that tire on my bike when it's brand new so that I can at least trust one thing and have a baseline for one thing. So I don't run tires I don't like, or I don't run tires I don't know anything about. I run tried and true tires right off the bat, so that gives me more of a baseline of what the bike is doing with the suspension and the frame and some of those other things, and the traction that I'm getting. That way I know it's a tire that I can trust. You need to check chain tension right here, get your manual, figure out what this spec is supposed to be, and check chain tension in a few different spots on the chain, because it might be too tight or it might be too loose. So an easy thing to check right here. Time to check head bearing tension on the bike so that the bars aren't too floppy or it isn't too tight. Loosen these bolts, loosen these bolts, loosen this bolt, and then you can adjust your head bearing tension right here on a KTM to get it to the exact spot where you want it. Awesome thing to do. check for loose spokes on your bike. I'm not talking about using a torque wrench. I'm just talking about going around and hitting the spokes and see if one of them is about to fall out. The last thing you want to do is have a loose spoke and end your day or damage some other component because you've got a spoke that's about ready to fall out. And I've had this happen before on bikes where spokes are literally almost out. So just go around and check to make sure that you don't have any really loose ones. If you're gonna ride in rocky technical terrain and there's some way to put a guard on the swing arm tabs, if you're on a KTM or a Husky, I highly recommend doing that right here to protect this side of the bike. And it's not just the KTMs, it would be a really good idea to have one here on the Beta as well as on the Yamaha that I've got. It's an easy place for damage to happen. If you can put a guard on here, you're gonna be better off. Even if you're gonna be running full wrap handguards, I think it makes sense to move your levers inward. That way it just protects them from the end of the bar. And you don't need the lever all the way to the end of the bar anyway, so move those levers in. I also put Teflon tape under my lever mounts. That way they can actually spin around. And yes, they will even have to spin around because you can break your levers even if you're running full wrap handguards. So put some Teflon tape under those perches and your levers will last a lot longer. If your bike uses a carburetor, you're going to need to tune that thing, maybe lean it out, especially if you're not running down by sea level. If you're up kind of where I am, a mile or two above the sea, you're gonna need to tune that carburetor so the thing will run decent. We wanna set our idle. Each bike is gonna be slightly different on how we do this, but we wanna set the idle so the bike isn't dying out there on the trail. We need to run in our brakes before they'll work properly. What do I mean by that? There's residue and oil on your brake pads and on your brake rotor, and the brakes do not stop. They have terrible performance until you've run them in. So I'll just take the bike around the block and drag the brake, sometimes for as long as 10 minutes front and rear until the brake starts actually performing correctly. With every bike I've got, you have different handlebar positions that you can use, and I'm generally moving them forward. On this bike, I've got them move forward. On this bike, I've got them move forward, and on this bike over here, I have them moved forward, although not all the way. So taller guys generally will want those bars further away from them. Shorter guys can have them closer to them. So adjust the position of your bars on the triple clamps. I take the steering stops out of my bikes if possible. That gives them the maximum allowable turn, or the tightest turning radius, which is really helpful in the nasty and gnarly stuff. Some bikes you can take that out, some bikes you can't. Watch to make sure that you're not bending your radiator with your fork tubes though when you're against the stops. I will not ride without a skid plate. That's a great skid plate. This is a great skid plate. That's a great skid plate. That's a great skid plate. This is the only aluminum one that I have. I generally prefer the plastic skid plates, and they've got to cover the linkage if there is a linkage on the bike. Here's another thing I've got on all the bikes, a rear disc guard. There's one on that one. There's one on that one. There's one on this one, and there's one on the Beta. Boom. We want to check the oil levels. It might be with a sight glass window, or it might be like a seat bolt like they have on the KTMs, but you want to check that. Another thing you're going to want to check up here is your coolant level right here. So you'd be surprised some of the time it isn't actually topped off on coolant. So let's check our coolant levels. Make sure there's enough oil in that air filter. Sometimes when they come on the bike, I swear there's not enough oil in them, so I'll add a little bit of oil to my filter before I ride it. I like to install a dirt bike channel bar pad because that's what all the cool kids are doing. No, seriously, if you don't have a bar pad, you should look into getting one. Doesn't have to be mine, but something I'd check into. If your bike has linkage, I have had some people tell me that there's basically no grease on their linkage bearings, so that's not a bad thing to be checking straight off the gate and make sure that it's got plenty of lubrication down there. If I'm not installing full wrap handguards, which I generally don't, then I like to install bar ends on my bike. It just makes the grips last longer and saves your throttle from getting completely hammered when you drop the bike down. On some of the bikes, I'll install a swing arm cover just to keep this thing from getting too beat up. It's just one of those things, they're cheap, and it can actually, protect the bike quite a bit from just cosmetic damage. Something I started doing recently is installing these fork tube covers. These are from Dingo Racing Products. They just snap on and off, and you can kind of see on the back they're open. So those things are pretty cool. Sometimes I'll install flag style handguards. This is the flag style. Sometimes I'll install full wrap. It's just a personal choice. Most of the time I'm not doing a full wrap handguard, but these are great handguards if you're going to do full wraps, or you could just stick with like a flag style handguard. These are actually 130 hours on these handguards, and they're stock and they're still going strong. So I don't always need to install them, but sometimes you do. If I know there's going to be a lot of slow going, I'll install a radiator fan, especially if it's slow going on a 4-stroke. You're definitely going to need a fan to help the bike cool down. If you're going to be getting jiggy in the rocks, it'll pay to install these fork shoes like I've got on the Yamaha and I've got on both of these KTMs. Extremely cheap. They're like 20 bucks and it'll save the bottom of your forks. We just had a video on power valves recently. I would suggest don't play with that power valve on a KTM until you've gone out and ridden the thing and see what it's like. Same thing on the Beta over there. Go out and ride the thing first before you start screwing with your power valve. On the newer KTMs, they come with 2 different throttle cams. The black is the more aggressive, the gray is the more mellow. Generally speaking, the gray is the one that comes installed on the bike, and this is probably better for the hard enduro stuff, whereas some guys might want a little bit more aggressive hit and use the black. Just depends on what you want to get out of your bike. If it's a KTM XCW or a Husky TE or even the Beta, I kind of like taking the taillight assembly off. This thing is so rigid that the first time that you have like a Ghost Rider or a wheelie over, it will break the entire plastic, all this back here. So I just take this off, and then this is a lot more flexible, and you don't break everything if you take this off. That's just what I do.
We're not working on your bike, are you?
No, I'm actually just doing modifications. Although a lot of the bikes come with really good batteries, some of them don't. This is a really good battery, anti-gravity. It's got restart technology. And I put that battery in the XCW, my hard enduro bike, and in the Yamaha because this bike is a harder starting bike. A lot of the KTMs come with pretty good batteries, but having an awesome battery that you can trust like this one would be a good idea. On some of the bikes, I'll install a more robust clutch cover, or you can just put a clutch cover protection over like an existing clutch cover from a Cherubies or some of these different brands. But this Carbon Up clutch cover is freaking awesome. A front rotor guard is not a bad idea. I don't have one in here that I really love, but they make some lightweight front rotor guards that are a really good idea in a lot of cases. Totally personal preference here, but I've been installing these oversized rear brake tips just for a little bit easier to find that with my boot than what some of the stock ones are, but not every bike allows you to do that. Like over here, the Yamaha, it's really a lot harder to change that tip. Installing a grab handle on your seat is a great thing for a hard enduro bike. This one was made by Trailbound, pretty cool product. You can put one of these fuel filters right up here in the top of the gas tank, and that way any of the fuel that you put down in that is going to be strained before it even gets in there. And here's a bonus one for you. You could put a pipe guard on your bike. I'm not a huge fan of pipe guards, but a lot of people are, so that's another one to throw on the list. Take a deep breath, Kyle. That was a lot. And you guys should take a deep breath because you don't have to do all of these things. This is just the list of the things that I go through or I check when I get a new bike or new to me, and it might be helpful to you. If you guys want to support Dirt Bike Channel, one of the easiest ways to do that is to use my links to Rocky Mountain ATV. Rocky Mountain ATV is awesome. They have the best prices on parts and tools and all of that stuff, and the shipping is awesome. I have links down in the description where you can go and see some of the things that I like to buy on a regular basis and some of the things that I know are trusted and I trust. Rocky Mountain ATV is awesome. It's where I get most of my stuff, and you can too. And if you use the links, it helps to support my family, believe it or not. Okay, so that's, I think, all that I have. If it's before June 15th when you're watching this video, make sure to get entered for the Beta and the Yamaha and the KTM because they'll all be given away shortly after June 15th. Head over to dirtbikechannel.com right now and get that done. Thanks, guys, and let's leave a single track.